Coming to communication. It's amazing how we come to out of glitch lines. It's true, stand the recognition of time settings. It's all levels of position location. It's important to understand that it's all connected to you through electrical surface, electrical settings, electrical positions of panel line position. It's all levels of you through correlation. It's understanding how you're all set up in position line directions. It's modified to all signals, all position location. All right. So I'll wait 10 minutes before we get started. So it's all about understanding the adaptations to its wires, its communication, its satellites, its Wi-Fi, its modem, right? And these things you have to get information. You really have to get into the adjustment location in your system. That's a trade standard because the computer has to really recognize the center of communication of you. You have your phones and you have a digital pad. It all has to be in sync in all calculation setting because it's your voicing grids that sets its calculation to its position locations of its line setting. All right. So it's important you understand how to get in that formation. All right. So today in class, obviously, we're going to get into position location schematics. Right. The schematic line setting is truly how to get in positions, how we get into our projections, how we see things, right, through light, and how we see things all levels through dark. The dark line centers the shades and the shadows. It sets position location of those directions. All right. So as we get into correlation, we understand we're on the lines of communication when it comes into the chakra system. Let's start with that. 0 to 12. Really understand what it is when you're traveling through your portals of communication. This gives you levels of channel operation streamlines. Okay. 12 is extremely crucial to all calculation. All right. So we're just going to go through positions of paint by number. Understand how the map is set up inside of you, how to work the correlations to the hardware and the software. Okay. It correlates to the brain. It correlates to the mind of its image that you're creating through its own design through GOD. Okay. So also too, just to get things started, I'm going to be setting up a masterclass on Thursdays. Okay. It's all about basically understanding the difference to the indifference location and how the brain is set up in the mind setting, right, to its adaptation when it comes into its app, which is all levels of creation to its avatar, because it's all levels of digital connection, right? Now there's a little bit of stop and go, right? There's a little bit of glitching, but it's going to balance out line setting. Okay, so it's important to understand how you're set up into your connections, because the thing is, you don't want to get into malfunction and ending line settings, especially when you trying to get an adaptation of what's going on with the brain and the mind setting of its image, because you're creating things, right, through your abundance of its vision. The vision is extremely important when it comes into the cortex, right? It's just trying to understand how things are set up, right? So that's why you have to focus really on all levels of the journey. Don't focus on the destination because the brain is working with you step by step, right? So that's the importance when you come into 0 to 12. It gives you in a position of its direction how to set these things up, okay? This is how you come into all calculations to its sovereignty and its freedom, okay? It's the most important to understand because once you create the beauty of the brain and how it works for you when it comes into its own projection locations, you're setting up the schematics, you're setting up a planning operation of you inside, right, through perspective. The position of its directional location is all levels of its image, how it comes into its relations of the sun of light and the moon of its emotional setting. But each position location of the sun and the moon has the male and the female, the masculine and feminine, to its calculation, right? To its image. The imaginary line setting comes into all calculations when it comes into the magnetic line system. It's all direct locations and how you see yourself through a hologram. Okay. But it's all digital plateau. All right. So this is a process where you get into the basic foundation into the master's class, how you set up step by step through the schematics of you through an architect line setting. Okay. This is all digital programming locations. Now, once you understand that adaptation system, you understand the functionality, right, to its process. And that function becomes its own system to its chakra setting. All right. So you have to really understand not just all correlation, but understand head to toe on every level to your electrical system of your mainframe. Your mainframe is extremely important because it's a window system of view to its correlation. Okay, you're tapping into its system. Okay, from input and audio put, Wi-Fi, highlighting centers, position location to its modem, and the tracker system is setting positions to its direction, and you're creating a design of view from your intention. As long as you follow your journey, you're fine step by step. Okay, so this is a process that we're going to get into. Okay, to really understand that. Okay, because it's the fundamentals of you. It's the mental capacity of you, understanding the physical line, the mental, the psychological, the psychosis of you. It's image. You co-create something. It comes into all calculations to its system. Okay, of traction. Okay, traction is very important. It's a foundation of you. Is putting these things together. Okay, so really get into that position, location, of directions. All right. Okay, so as we're setting these things up, we're going to start off with 0. So we start with 0 location. Okay, you start with that line setting. Okay, now all communications of 1, in position of 2, in position of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, and you got 11, and you got 12. Okay, okay, so that's 0 to 12. Now you take in 0 in position locations to a square. Okay, you're checking the 0 gravity. Okay, you're checking the ground setting. Okay, and you're checking the position location of security into its position locations. Right, that's 0. Right, so this is 0, this is grounds, and this is security. Okay, triangulation of 3 line setting all set up. Okay, now it's sure you understand how to set up a schematics pattern in position location of what the brain is doing in the first place. It understands indifference location to its difference. That's the position locations where you come and focus on the journey step by step. It's like going up to 1,000 steps into its arc. Okay, you're taking one step at a time and you're not missing steps. Okay, that's the importance when you come into the planning of its operation, just through its fundamental of its function to its system location chakra settings. Right, so now we understand 0. We understand the grounds is set up. We understand the position of the security is set up into our location to a hologram structure. Okay, so when you come into one line setting, you can add to 0, okay, to 1 to 3, or you can just do a separate line signal to one line setting. And in position locations come to all calculations. And again, you can get into security line setting. Right, security line setting is a box location, so you're boxing locations, or you can do a circle line setting, whatever you want in positions, right? But you have to understand the operation, which is 0 gravity, the grounds, and the security, even before you come into correlation. So what you're doing is the avatar is creating its own design of travel from 0 to 12. Okay, that's a basic understanding. But see, the brain and the circuits inside line, the electrical line connection of its mainframe, has to understand what you're doing through graph, through letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. Okay, this is the only way you get in position locations to its hologram structure of its design. Okay, so when you get in line position location of 4, right, you come into solar generation light setting. Okay, you come into 5 line setting, which is your time sector line positions split into positions of the panels. All right, and you get into 6 and you come into all position location to its water containment system, sets its position location, a level setting. All right, water containment system. See the water? Set line position location of 7 comes into a box line to its theta that comes into sonar calculations of perception. Right, so you get the basic understanding is what you're doing is you're using your tracker system to all levels of graph settings. So when you're setting these things up, you're setting it through schematics of its functionality that becomes its fundamental system to its schematic location. All right, so that's the basic understanding. All right, so understand this locations. Let's say you get in this position location. Okay, and crossing streams, cross line settings, all calculations 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0 line. So that's a digital format. That's a digital pad. There's another digital pad. Okay, in position locations of calculations. It's all about you creating these things from your hologram structure line. All right. So when you're creating these things, it's a beautiful thing. Using a Fibonacci swirl, right, which is 3-line connection. Send calculations to an open signal to another Fibonacci swirl setting. Coming in communications to the opposite cycle, set line, position line, direction. Setting correlations to line conditions with theta box system, right? All in position. See the computer? See the theta? See the travels? All through 3. So it's important to understand what the brain is doing, right? The brain has to understand the, like I said, the difference, or you're going to keep addressing all communications to the elephant in the room. All right. So that's eternity standing. Remember we started location at 34, and 34 equals location to anything the line saying location of its triangulations into position of 4. So it's 1, 2, 3. All right. So it's 3 here, and 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's 4 here. Right. So 34 equals locations into its line connections. So you got a triangulation of 3, right? That turns it in position locations to a levels of 4 calculation. Okay. So I really want you guys to recognize your geometry settings. Understand the patterns, the line settings, and to understand the mainframe. The mainframe of view is understanding the hydrolysis, to understand the electrical system of view, the wires calculation settings of view. You know, you come into all levels of compressors, you come in position locations to all levels. What's that? It's a cup, right? There's the handle, right? Now, here's the sun. Okay, sun is reflecting locations, right? Shades are right here. Okay, you see that? That's a design. Now that comes all line setting. So the position locations of the brainwaving pattern is the position of theta, equal line conditions to its box, box position location of its triangle setting, equal line conditions to its light, slash locations into position locations of its shade in its shadow communication setting. So this is all calculations to all levels into its hardware that set location to its sun, that sets its position locations to its cup, that sets its position locations to its shade of shadows. And that's how it becomes a cup in position locations, all levels of its mainframe. So I'm just showing you how you have to really balance your settings. All right. So it's kind of like you're creating a digital platform of you and a hologram structure of you. It's so powerful when you come into all levels of your communication settings, right? You look at an apple line setting, okay? It's really good to know that you can draw. There's an apple, right? And set position locations, all level system, shade and shadows, set locations. But it's on this sideline setting, right? So it's in this direct signal, okay? It's on this direct signal. Try to understand that calculation setting, right? So you got sonar communication settings and 4 panels of communication, right? So understanding that, you can bring the moon in and set locations into its triangulation. Okay? So this is about understanding how to colorate the line setting rotations. This is where you merge into transformations of calculation setting. So you're coloring this in and all position location of directions, right? Shades of shadows and set location. Okay? So there's so many different ways where you come into what you're doing. So this is what it is. We come into all levels of schematics. We know what that is through all connections of structure, right? The structure location is its structure. So what you're doing is you're coming in position locations. We'll start off with perspective. All right. 3-point system line setting. 3 dots coming in communications. All right. All right. There we go. So you got position locations into see? See how it becomes a structure? See how it becomes a design? See how all through perspective locations, point system line setting into its flux capacitor. Electrical light setting line rotation. Sets position to its ground setting. Opens its cycle high center interference calculation. Right? Opens a higher line position location of its directions. See, it gets more complicated, right? Right? So, and this is where it comes into a road graph setting to its system location. On both sides, right? So you got 4 angles of set locations, right? 4, 8, 12, and 13, 14, 15, and 16 line settings in position location of its directions to higher communications. Okay. So it's really understanding what you're doing through a telephone pole. And what you understand is you're getting in position of this metric system location of scales through E equals MC square. Mass calculation to its all levels. Volumes U in all position locations. And that's how the brain starts to understand what you're doing through its structure of its division. Okay? So there's a reason why I took perspective in all calculation settings. There's two line settings in rotation. Okay? Into a kite. Right? It's easy, right? Setting calculation streamlines and set locations. Sun comes here, shade comes here in position line directions. Okay? It's always in the direction, always in the directions, right? So, and then it shadows off. Okay? So, really understand the sun is position of its action. The calculation system is all levels of its reaction setting. The moon is its emotional track setting, right? But the sun and the moon are always in position of directions into triangulations, all levels, the masculinity, and femininity, position location, all levels of structure locations into its center operation. Always, 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 always. So that's what you have to balance out, the projection location of the sun and the projection location of the moon into its position. Comes into all levels of perception. See? Coming out line setting in all connection, right? Your eye receptors are basically scanning everything around you. Just try to imagine that you're creating these things through its image. All right, so let's get in position location on map. All right, so set locations. Just showing here. Okay, coming in here. Okay, so I'm just showing you how this sets up locations. All right, and you got the entrance. You walk in, and then you got the floor plan and set locations. And over here is set location here. All right. And I've got another one over here, like set rotations, just like that. Okay. So you walk in, here's the door, right? You're walking in, there's the door. Over here is position locations. All right. There's the washroom, right? Over here, go through here. Here's the living room. Okay. Setting position locations. You're walking down a hallway, you set locations, and here's a bedroom. Okay. Go over here, and here's in position locations, all levels of a dining room. Setting calculations to all lines, living room locations, or you could change it into all levels of a kitchen. Kitchen line center rotations. And here you have position locations to all levels, to another room. So that's what you're doing, is you're creating a line setting. So when you understand the schematics of its map, it's very powerful how you look at yourself as an architect. You are your own self-engineer into its position to its locations when it comes into the hardware and its software of its mechanism, a high setting to travels of its mainframe. Okay? So it's important you understand how to use this, because this is what it's all about. Because everything that you look around is all calculated and modified through shapes. There's always going to be shapes and shadows on anything that you do in position, location, of direction. Okay? Always, 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 always. And it's always in position of its reflection. Always in its reflection. Has to be. Has to be. So that's the calculations where you come into align position locations, right? Light, okay, and position of dark. Shades and shadows. We are shaded. We're not outlined. Okay, everything that you see has to be outlined in position locations of shading. Shading is understanding all position location of direction, right? Digital format, digital rotation settings, it's all calculated to modify how you see yourself in set locations, right? This helps you know always informs to get location to a setting. So you get a zero line setting rotations, right? Setting communication to all level system, all right, in three line settings, all right? So you got your zero, you got your grounds, and you got your security. Okay. So platitude visual locations, you're creating a higher line setting. So, and then you got a position location, still levels of ground setting, and you got another line position location, another ground setting. Okay, so what are you creating? You're creating a portal of communication, right, to the other side line setting. Okay, so it's important to understand how the Fibonacci swirl goes in position location to its triangulation line setting. So it's important to understand how to correlate position location to its window setting. See, very powerful. It comes into communication of its triangulation. There's the house, right? There's the portal. So the portal is going through the position locations into set locations, which is all levels of its west, east, south line connections. Doesn't matter where direct locations, but you come into your north, you come into east, and you come into all levels of your south line positions into your set location. Okay? So to understand is to understand you through paint by number. Okay? 3. Well, 3 can be this. All position locations to all calculations. 2, butterfly, right? Or you basically can do this in position locations to all level line setting, high interference in calculations in position locations to its ground setting, to all calculations, to its mountains of its pyramids. You have to get into imagination. Imagination is everything. The correlation of the hardware is the foundation when it comes into the mechanism of travel. You have to learn how to use the process of its position of its schematics that sets its circuits and set location all through your tracker setting. The coloration is set for you in that line rotation. Teresa said how to use it is in your position of its directions, because that's what you're doing. You're going through planning of operation, right? Traveling through these things gets you a better understanding how to create it to its planet system of rotation. Okay? Everything is shades and shadows. And all formation line setting. All formation line setting. There's always shades and shadows on everything, guys. There has to be, because it's all connected to its operation setting location to the sun and the moon through projection. You're setting up you in line screens of activation settings. So that's important to understand these things. All right. So this is your avatar. Okay. This is your avatar, right? And let's say it wants to create something. All right. So it's all about understanding how you set these line settings. Okay. This is a brainwave pattern. This is your brain. This is your graph. This is your heart. And it's calculation setting. This is your heat signature patterns. This is your temperature readings from 98 up, set locations, just starting with that line setting, right? So use the heart position line direction locations. It's got 2 heart signal settings, electrical light settings, 2 position locations on line rotation. Setting position location calculation is all levels. So there's a temperature reading. It's all connections to its metric setting locations. Equal line center rotations box position of 0, 0, 0. Bracket line center rotations in position locations all levels into high setting into your Merkaba or your tesseract or your tetrahedral location. All right. So there's a lot of ways to set the signals. How to really understand that is through your graph locations of your system. To know exactly how to use your alpha, delta, theta, beta, omega, and your communications to levels of gamma and radiation to its hardware, and the mind is adaptation to its image, to its phenomenon of its construction location, to its design that comes into its visionary line rotation, into its calculations, to its positions, to all level setting line conditions in high interference of its theta box. Okay. So theta box is the visionary line, but you need the sun for light and you need the moon for shades and shadows, because that's what creates a structure. It's easy to understand anything through box to its position location of travel in 3 line settings to a circle line rotation of Fibonacci, right? So inline center locations, we got 3 line settings. Okay, we can go inline center rotation to its position, 3-line settings equals 3-line settings, right? Set position locations to its Fibonacci to a double helix into a location setting. So it's sure you understand that you got 333, right? Where is it coming up through line settings? Sure you send all communication to its zero gravity, into its ground setting, into its security setting, and everything to its solar panel calculations in direct locations to another Fibonacci sequence in set locations. So it is all levels of heart, mind, and soul. And once you reach those line setting rotations, everything comes in digital plateau. And this is where it comes to all calculations, how you see yourself and all levels of travel. Okay, so you're setting up images, you're putting the pieces and puzzles together to its connections. You pick up a puzzle and you're putting the pieces together. And you look at it, it's amazing what you can see, right? It's an image of what you created in your mind setting. Okay, so that's the importance you have to understand. You have your hardware, okay, which is all levels of foundation of its system. Okay, so if you understand that, then you understand the mind is all collaboration to its image, which is its placebo. The cortex and the mystical cortex line stream has to truly understand why you're creating these things, is the how of operation to all calculations, especially when you're interacting its position of interlacing, interdesigning in all calculations to its structure of your chakra settings. Okay. Now, when you get into that locations, 0, 1, 2, 3, you can do a lot with 0, 1, 2, 3. 0 gravity line rotations, 1 line division line rotations, 2 position locations, all levels of security position line setting, right? And 3 line position locations and 0 line 1 position location of Fibonacci, swirl line rotations, back force calculations. So you get a back force line setting and rotations to a force communications into all levels of an bell line setting to a satellite location. All right. So that's what you're doing, is you're creating images in your mind. And the only way to do that is understand the hardware and its software and how it's all in modification to its simulation. Okay. So how's everybody doing? Tina, Danielle, bouncing ready. Great. Lauren, how's it going? Ryan, Gypsy on deck. Great. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to travel you guys right through locations into your schematics of your system. This is going to open up the light and the shades and shadows of you in correlation. You get a better understanding how to set up the image you want in your provision through your own design of your own imagining. Okay. Studying signals, high center line inference, guarding calculations, streams, Esther. So 6-dimensional observation cycle. Okay. Looking inside position location outline setting. Position location 7th dimension, 8th dimension, 9, 10, 11. Set signals and high center interference. Set them position locations into 0, 0, 0 track locations. Studying flux capacitor line rotations. Set communications, set location of box setting. High interference of star vectors and timelines. Set a rotation spin cycle. The set locations into its 0 gravity, 1 line setting into 2 line setting locations, equal line condition of security position line direct locations into the graphing setting, high rotation line interference of the metric media communication system, bracket line centers, equal equation line centers, factor O calculations, equal line conditions of pi. All right, 20 minutes, have fun. And you're signaling in set locations. So it's all about understanding how to set up the mind setting because the mind is here and the brain is here. Okay, so it's always like this, always. But the process of a system is this. So now you understand why it's in position location, there's direct locations and 2 hemisphere line settings. Direct location signals, G, 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 G. So keep sending signals back in communication settings. And this is where airbender comes in, position locations to shapes anomalies. Setting calculations streamlines locations. It's kind of like looking through a kaleidoscope. Kaleidoscope comes position location, higher line rotation, higher position location of travels into higher communication settings. Okay? So it's true you understand how to create these things, locations, and how the brain sets up its position location to its own main frame. comes into structure communication to its security line setting. Okay. This is all calculations to hardware, and this is all calculations to your mind setting of rotation. Okay. So it's important you understand how to use these things, right? All right, gel calculation setting, high line rotations. Yeah, I'm excited too to help you guys out to get you in your master class. So level Sarah, welcome. Rainer, Cami, Michaela, Airbender. All right, Yolanda. All right, Heather. It's great to see everybody, This is going to help you out on so many forms in calculations, guys, especially when you come into all levels of its image, because the image needs to understand the journey. It needs to understand its will, its force, its creation, and its location. But you don't focus on the destination. You focus on what you are doing, because it's processing, it's upgrades, downloads, and uplinking systems. Okay, and it's high sending. It's high sending you into higher calculations to its structure, of its design, of its image, of its co-creation. Okay? So it's so different when you're doing it on a computer. So it's all about understanding how to bring the two to its simulation. It becomes a simulation graph of an open window, an open sequence, an open pattern, an open geometric operation of design. Okay? But it's pretty incredible how it's set up every day. So if you understand that, then you understand the progression of what you're doing through all calculation settings. So this is how you come into all levels of your thoughts. And you're thinking, wow, I got thoughts, I got navigations, I've got sight, I've got sound. I think I'm understanding. Are you thinking, or are you trying to understand? So the thinking is all calculation. So we come into Y line setting, equal line conditions of flux capacitor, right? So this is the Y line setting, right? Y to Y to Y, right? So it comes into equalocations of all levels of how. Okay, it's how everything works inside location. That's eternity standing. But now you guys are coming to all new contract locations, soul generation light settings. You have to really recognize the position of its operation and how it works for you inside, right? Especially when you're in recharging. Okay, what do you think is happening with you with its hardware and software? Okay, it's creating, right, through your image. Okay, so you're creating something from its structure, of its design. You're manufacturing new of GOD through coloration and travel. If you go line setting high interference, high Sarin locations, let's go in that position locations. Let's go in this position. Let's go in this position. Let's start there, right? And you come into this position locations. That's creation, but what is it, right? You have to understand its position to all calculations. You have to understand all calculation what it is in all position, right? If you understand that, you get into higher levels of frame calculations. After you understand that, you go into this position locations. After you understand that, you come into this line center locations and position location of the design. Right? It's very powerful. You come into this, and set location. Right? It's all created in the mind setting. Okay. The observation line rotation interference sets position location of directions going in this line directions. But remember, you always start off in position locations into 0 before you get anything in travel locations of a higher division locations of calculation. Okay? And you look at those locations, there's the intelligence. See the face recognition timeline? You're always in your drawings of travel. Always, 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 always. You have to be there because you're the center, which is your avatar. So your avatar is in its reality that's creating. You start with the fantasy, you look at the reality becomes the image becomes the projection location of its film strip line setting, and it comes at all formation location of the sun and position location to its moon, which is its motional setting, and then you get the lights and the shades and the shadows of its schematics. It's very powerful when you get that position location of its directions, right? So it's important not so much to draw, but understand what you're drawing is the why becomes the how. And once the how understands everything that correlations, you come into all calculations to its abundance. Okay, see? A, travel. There it is. What is that? A mailbox. So it's important you understand these things because everything is created through diameter. Everything is created through barometer. Everything is created through heat signature patterns. Everything is created through coloration. Everything is created through travel mechanisms. Everything is created through the mind setting, guys. Everything has to be. All you're doing is you're creating the image. You just have to understand how it bounces you in space and time of pi. All right? Pi is extremely important, especially when you're coming into structure. To create a house is very simple. To understand what the house is all connections to its schematics location, to its system. There's a basic house, right? And then line of rotation, you can have a chimney there, right? Smokestack over here, line setting there. See? Easy, right? But to get more difficult is going beyond the system location of its design line setting. See? So you got a structure line setting, okay, security position, and you got a panel position location, center operation setting. See the panel, right? You set another panel calculation setting and position locations, right? So it's all about understanding what you're doing with high center interference, and you got this open window in travel communication. You got to learn how to set these things up in your own positions, right? And then basically it comes into this position, and it comes into this position, and it comes into this position, and in this position, right? When you go through that line rotations, you're traveling right through it, through its position locations inside your house. So this is how you create locations to its portal. So the 0 to 12 is what? You're creating a portal of its dimension of space and time through its pi. The Fibonacci of three-line setting is creating its position of direction. Okay? You have security line setting, which is all calculation, right? So to open up the portal, you have to get in circulation and rotation. Okay? To open that line setting, sets its position location to Fibonacci. So it comes out like this. And then you straighten it out. And the avatar travels through it. Okay? So that's how you set it up. So it comes in something like this. Okay? So the avatar is here. It's created what it wants in position of its direction. It's ready to travel in position of its direct locations to its system, right? So after it does its scan setting, it opens up its sonar line rotation into 3 panels. You have to have sonar because sonar sets the ripple effect. You got circulation rotations, and they set up the all calculations to its dimension, right? And it goes right through, right? So it goes right through and up. Okay? Which is correlation to high center location of a half pipe. Now, that's position location at levels when it comes into this line setting, into direct locations into its UFO. See the UFO? See? You see how you create these things through a tunnel line setting to a UFO position locations? That's 2 frames of correlation, all created through an atom line setting. So you have to really, really pay attention when it comes into the sync of you, S, Y, N, C. The systematic line centers, the Y line rotations and position locations, you come into all calculation neutralized setting in all levels of communication, right? The sync, graphs, set line division. Okay? So you have to really understand everything that you do, it's positive. Because if you're creating negative, you're creating negative engineered positions of errors. And you're creating errors, what are you doing to your computer frame setting? Error, 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 error. It's not creating anything, right? Now, every time you stay in a negative line setting in a structure design locations into its hardware and software, you are creating a black hole of its calculation setting. You're creating a black hole, you're coming into dark matter. So, and then it's just going to wheel you in, and it's going to go circle, 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 circle. It's set location, and it's going to create its own matrix of its own design setting and position and direction. And that's not what you want to do. So, being positive in all ways and forms is understanding how to break down the alphabetical stream setting. An alphabetical stream setting is understanding how to get into the hardware and the software in one line setting. It sets its location to all calculations, to your schematics, to its mapping AI connection. You're creating a map, a sequence, and a navigation to a form of all correlations of panels and all correlations of space and all correlations of time through pi. Okay? These are extremely important when you are in the basic foundations of your mind. Because what you're doing is you're co-creating, okay, through its image. Okay? But the hardware has to understand why you're doing it. If it doesn't understand the why, you're not going to understand the how with the mind. They have to be in collaboration of one. Okay? Sync in one. The physical, the mental, the functional. Okay? The adaptation, the surface of you, the calculations, the modifications of you, the simulations of you, the graph settings of you. Okay? The structures of you. And its provision. This opens all signals and your line connections. Okay? So truly understand you're creating whatever you are in position of your intention, which goes one way or which goes the other way. Okay? So if you are not in the center operation, you are in the center operation locations of a glitch, which is set locations and position lines to your time setting through pi, a flux capacitor, which means you're like this, you're going like this, right? You're not moving anywhere, right? Because you can't make up your mind to be positive or line setting locations are being negative. So you're not going to create anything through structure if you go positive or you go negative. What do you do? In position locations, combustion. So why is it so important to understand the how? How it works for you is a benefit for you. And this is how you come into your manifestations. See, the thing is, this is about you controlling you in your mind through space. Just because you can go fast doesn't mean you go fast. So to understand the process is to understand the steps to its connection and how long it takes. You're going up the steps one by one. All right. You're trying to understand the grounds. Zero gravity. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. Then you get into that, and then you come into the grounds. You understand that the grounds are set up nicely. All right. And then you go into 2, and you come into your security. All right. Setting position locations. Right. Then you go into all position locations into 3, which is your connections to your Fibonacci. You're creating a portal of communication. Setting line center and high interference locations. Now you have 2 sets position location to its security. Setting position location is a zero gravity line position location to its grounds. Grounds set rotation position location high setting. Setting communication line setting sets position location to higher levels and track locations. And then you come into all position locations into 4 and set location of sonar and set location of solar inline rotations into your timelines in your heart reactor location. Okay, step by step. Okay, so it's more fun when you do this. Let's say a line signature line setting in one line rotations off calculations. So you're going all the way here. So structure, 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 structure. Oops, space. So negative setting goes back. So how do you do that? Negative equal line conditions. Take it out of box locations. Y factor line rotations. Factor over pi. Okay. You got to do over because you're going into the future line. So that changes position locations to its negative to equal line centers. So the negative becomes positive and the positive becomes negative line setting in rotation calculation setting, sets position locations, and there you go. There's the line and there's your complete scissor. Okay, so do you understand why it's so important to be positive when you're creating things? The line setting, it's creating its image. Okay, so it's important you understand that. Hold on a second. I think the best way to look at things, everyone, is to truly stand to see everything around you, how it's created. Everything is created for a purpose. Everything is created for a reason. Everything is created through operation. There's a reason because it's all connected to you, to the mind system. Okay? This is what you have to understand. And once you understand how to use these things, you understand how to control the space of the speed that you are doing in position, location of direction. Direction. Stay positive because you're creating a structure of a design. As soon as you go negative, you're going to the offline, you're going off grid. Okay? So you got to understand the plateaus and the forms and the communication line settings to all calculations. Okay? It's important you understand these things because you're walking. Okay? You walk before you run. You don't run and then walk. You walk and then you run. Okay? So if you understand that, then you understand the direct locations of space and time. If you're in position of walking and running, you're in position of center. If you're in position of all calculations into running and walking, you're in position of time and space. You got to fix that line position locations into walking and running in correlation setting of travel communication. Okay? Which is space and time. All right? So, need to understand all steps before setting space and time. That's it. See, you're creating these things, you're seeing these things, but you're not understanding the schematics, how it's set up into the hardware and the software of you. You can do it on your computers, bravo, but it has nothing to do with the mind, guys. You understand? See, this is where you're mastering your communication to your physical adaptation line setting. But when you're in your avatar setting, you're creating your own hologram structure of you in your reality that affects you in your positive negative location of what you're creating through the sun and through the moon. The sun of action and the moon of emotion, right? But it's all calculated and modified to its divinity position locations because it's going to always have its masculinity and femininity on both side calculation. And that's what you have to balance out. It's the masculinity and the femininity of your emotional setting in position locations of your hardware, software, and its calculations to its avatar setting. Taking out of track setting linear rotations, high center interference. Reset line position location calculations. You guys are out. All right. And so, you know how you start out the locations when you come into seeing is believing, and believing is seeing? Well, it's all a process of you. It's your intention of what you believe. Do you actually believe what you're doing? Do you actually believe what you're seeing? Are you seeing and believing, or are you believing or seeing? What? There's no difference. The difference is it's here. It's your adaptation, what your intention is. How do you feel? So let's say you say not, can't, right? Won't. To make this very well clear, guys. Okay? Can't, not, won't. Won't, can't, and not. Now, soon as you say the words, you're automatically traveling backwards. You understand? It doesn't matter how you say it. It's not positive in your universal line of communication. So the brain doesn't understand adaptation of its image. So what's it going to do? It's trying to understand you through its frequency. And you have to balance these things out when it comes into the vibration line settings of your graph locations and what you're creating through its operation. And that's all you're doing is you're creating the schematics of a design through GOD, the geometrics operation of its direction, division, location of its calculation. Okay? So same with can't, back, won't. You're not moving forward. So as soon as you say the word, even if you say it in a positive way, it doesn't matter. You said it in position locations, you're going back. You're not moving forward because the brain doesn't understand the difference of what you are saying. It's trying to understand. It's complicated, right? So when you are in recalculating, modifying, or anything that locations, when you are sleeping, you're trying to understand the communications and why you're seeing these things. Okay? The why is the how. So you change that line setting. How becomes all levels of yes. Can't becomes can. Okay? And won't brain frequency settings. It's changing the graph. It's changing energy lines. It's changing your electrical system. It's changing your mainframe. But to understand that, you have to see it, right? To believe it. Believing is seeing or believe. It doesn't matter. What matters is what you are connected to. How do you feel when you're in the positive of yourself? The vibrations are very high. So why can't you stay there? Because you can't get balanced with your emotional setting. That's the problem. It's so easy to create a negative line setting into an error, then a positive locations to its program setting of its operation. So these are the things you have to understand how it works for you every single day when you are recharging, because that's what you're doing. You're charging your adapters of your avatar to high rise your communications in your percent of 100% line connections. You're connecting your location to your phone, right? Or anything with your computer. You don't plug it in. You can't operate it, can you? You can't see anything. I can't see anything. I see dark. I see black. Well, because you haven't charged your phone or you haven't charged your computer. It's just logistics. But when you're coming into the brain, the interpretation is different when you come into your dreams, into visions. The brain has to understand what you're doing, because if it doesn't understand the path or anything through a tree or anything, what it sees, you're never going to understand anything if you're not positive. As soon as you change the positive line setting, it changes the vibrational graph of its schematic locations to its hardware. The hardware finds its position location and creates its own intelligence line setting into the mind adaptation. So try to understand the psychosis location of the psychological setting line connections of you through the schematics. Okay? So stop getting into judgments and get into all calculations of what's happening with you. This is through the hardware and the software to its application. Okay? It's about moving forward. It's not knowing the past. Past doesn't exist. So why are you bringing it up? You're confusing the brain setting. You're confusing the brain graph. You're confusing the brain electrical setting. You're confusing the mainframe of you, which is confusing the image. So if the hardware is trying to create the image, but you can't figure these things out, and all of a sudden you get a negative cycle line interference, you're not creating its image. It's stored in its information system, but what does that do? It causes a cluster of universal adaptation. What does that come into? It comes into combustion location. And that causes locations to its headaches and its migraine system. Headaches and migraines comes to all line center locations when the brain is trying to finish its picture. And if it doesn't finish its construction locations of what it is, what's going to happen to the line center location in your mind of its adaptation? The basic thing is to stay positive and always informed when you're creating something. If you want to finish something, you don't get angry, you don't get frustrated, you finish it. And when you finish it, you got something creative. You just created something without any emotion. Take the emotion out of all calculation. And that's the only way you're going to understand anything through its hardware and its software location. Okay? It's important you understand these things, especially when you are traveling extremely fast in capacity setting. Okay? If you're going to correlation set locations into 60,000 line setting, okay? 60,000 line setting. Okay? Set line position locations, 60,000 bracket 3 line setting, and set position locations, all levels. So that's computer rotation settings into your PCU, computer line center PCU. Okay? Setting calculation. All right. So the position of the brain setting and the positions of its mind setting location and the sun communications and its moon setting location is trying to stand a perception. Okay. So as long as you understand the 60 capacity set locations into bracket line centers of 3 line center rotation interference, you get in computer rotation setting in position location of 72 equals set communication. So you're setting your communications to your calculations of your design. It's so important to finish these things because I know a lot of people try to figure these things out and they look at familiar position locations and they say, I can't do it. I can't finish this drawing. There's no way I can do this. You can. You just don't want to. And if you don't want to, what are you saying to your system, to your hardware and your software calculation? You have to get these things done. But it's not a forced issue. It's a continuous force, an adaptation of a surface. And when you come into that surface, it understands its set communication setting in a 72 and a 60,000 line setting into your PCU locations of compute system. So it's extremely important to look at these things because I'm telling you, you have to set these things up in a map and your mind is trying to understand what you're setting up through its image. And if the hardware doesn't understand the image, you're not going to create anything in that select locations. And you're going to be keeping all line center to your karma cycle calculation. That's what's going to happen. That's what happens when the hardware and the software don't understand each other through the sun or through the moon of its emotional system, which becomes a karma cycle. Okay? You stay in that karma cycle until you basically get in position locations. Get a better light signature of you, get a better adaptation system of you, get a better promotion locations of you, get a better modification settings of you, get a better calculations of formations of you, get a better position location unconditionals of you. The process is to stay high in vibration setting. And you're going to do everything you can to figure out what is going on with the circulation and its rotation. Circulation, rotations, opening up the portal, going through the sacral, creating. Avatar travels right through it because it's what it's doing is creating its image. And once it creates its image, it knows what it is doing. So it understands the chakra systems of 0 to 12 now, right? That's the importance you guys have to understand, because it's so powerful in the mind setting. It's a beautiful thing when you get into that correlation, right? Staying positive, being positive. I am positive. So I know I'm going to get this done. I know the structure is going to be done. I want to get this done. Not, I don't know if I can do this. I'm not sure if I can do this. I can't do this. So what are you saying to yourself inside? You're not going to complete the system, and you'll go back onto the karma cycle. Okay? So it's not karma. It's karm, position locations in your direct line settings, and set locations, all levels of travel location. Getting in position line directions to understand the karma cycle location is its metrics. You come into all line connections to dogma, dharma, set line settings. That's the karma cycle locations, a positive and negative. Okay? That is what you're coming into every single day when you come into structure of your hologram structure locations into your avatar. Okay? That's a true understanding where you need to be in the mind setting. It's all calculation and adaptations when you come into the polarity, the polar shift, the polarity line settings. Okay? The paradox, the quantum interference, the quantum entanglement of you. It's all calculated and modified how you see yourself through intention. I am going to get this structure done. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Done. Move on to the next. Let it go. Don't focus on what you just finished doing. Let it go so you go into the next adaptation system. You don't want to confuse acceleration of the mind line into capacity location, especially when you're 60,000 line settings of correlation. Okay, it's important you understand these things because it's all connected to your metric system of letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. Okay? It's powerful. It really is. But you really got to focus on these things, I'm telling you, because if you want to keep being on your karma cycles, feel free. But that's not going to set you free in any way and form, in any calculation setting. You have to get into that adaptation cycle, set position locations, start locations, understanding why you're in this situation, know exactly you're going to get this done. That is number one. If you can't find a way to stay positive for one day, how are you going to understand anything that you co-create? You're always in that position location of excuses. Give you an excuse on this and an excuse on that, but you are putting yourself in that position. Nobody else is. Remember, it's you and only you that can fix you. Nobody else. Staying in that position location gives you everything you want through your abundance locations. Channel offers streamlines, set lines, communication frame lines, all line direct locations to assist locations. Okay? Getting that direct signal opens all signals, right? Getting direct signal is extremely powerful because now you're understanding the connections to both. We connected to the quasar fractions, right? That's the importance, why it's so connected to you in all ways and forms, right? But I got to tell you, team, really stay positive, because the thing is that your life is consistent on what you do through your intention, and your intention evolves in so many position line directions and how you modify your line settings to your simulations of what you're co-creating. It's all calculated and modified inside of you. So all you got to do is just balance out the direct locations of what you're doing through travel, through the avatar's self of its construction locations, of its schematic line setting. Okay? But if you always find a way to be in a negative cycle, you're never, ever going to create anything in the mind adaptation. You'll be all confused, right? This is not easy to understand until you understand the process of easy. This is a formation where you have to understand the baby steps inside and how it works through its operation. Okay? Drawing a picture is knowing exactly what the design is. It's through light and it's through shades and shadows. And when you create these things, it's all levels of its image that's created through space and time, through pi, through transmitting, receiving. It's energy, vibration, frequencies, harmonics. It's all connected to its design of a hologram. Now it's going to get complicated now, right? Because you have to truly understand why it's in the mind setting. Okay? Nothing outside. Everything is inside. Everything is built inside. You're a system from inside that reaches so many deep cores to each chakra setting because it has its own systematical system that's modified in its simulation. Okay? Inner balance of a complete reframe. Yep. That's exactly what it is. You know, really get into the positive line setting. I mean, if you're going to create a structure, why would you want to be angry in that set locations? Because that's not going to help you in any way and form. It's just going to offline your signals, put your in position locations into an error, setting calculated streamlines. The brain has to understand the difference location of what it is, of what you're doing through its image. And that's all it is. You're just manifesting images. That's all you're doing. It's how to do it. But being positive is everything through its connection. All right? You're creating something through a graph line setting. Hey, look at that. So you started here, up here, down here, right? There's a graph right there. So the brain is trying to understand what you're doing. So this is all in good position location. You got 0 line setting. 0 looks good through 1 line security. It's going a little bit up. Well, security line is a little bit off. And line 0 locations is Fibonacci. You can't create that locations because you're way up here in position of stress. So you can't create it. You have to be in a balanced position locations of this and set locations. The waving setting has to be balanced in position locations from this way and this way location. Size graph is calculation streamlines and all levels of those box locations, right? So that's the importance. You have to understand how it's set up, but you have to see these things to understand the sensories, the communications to its modification line setting. This opens all levels of you in this correlation. Okay. Yeah. So really understand that. So what you're doing is you're reaching higher levels of inhibitors and you're reaching higher levels of your sensory set locations and you're reaching higher levels of your capacity locations. The mind has to understand what you're doing. Okay. It has to understand what you're trying to do through its hardware. The hardware is its foundation. The mind is its adaptation. So if you understand the two, you understand how to put them together through the sun and through the moon. And when you put that line position locations, you come into its vision equals its system. Okay. It's the visionary cortex line setting because you're seeing these things through perception locations, right? So, but I am looking forward to the master class, which is going to be holding next Thursday. We'll keep you updated what's going to be happening. Okay. All right. So I think that's good for today. No class tomorrow. I'm off tomorrow, mañana. But other than that, if you have any other questions, feel free. Okay. Adios.